This is a troubling memory from my childhood when I was around 7 or 8 years old. My mom usually took my brother and me trick-or-treating, but that particular year she dropped me off at my friend Alex's house after school. Alex, our friend Mark, and I planned to go together. Mark and Alex were a year older than me. I had met them while playing outside with my brother on the block, as they lived just around the corner. Alex had a unique family situation that I never fully understood. His sister was about 20 years old, which created a significant gap between them. She seemed to be his primary caregiver. Whenever I visited their home, it always had a strong smell of cats, and his sister frequently had a different boyfriend over. She often seemed distant and never acknowledged me or even said hello. Alex's dad was absent from their lives, and his mom was usually working out of town. I think I met her just a few times, but we never stayed in touch long enough for me to piece everything together. Anyway, my mom dropped me off at Alex's house, expecting that his mom would supervise us during trick-or-treating. After saying goodbye, I entered his home where Mark was already waiting. We all had large pillowcases ready to fill with candy. It was around this time that I learned neither Alex's mom nor sister would be joining us. As a young kid, I felt a bit uneasy knowing that Mark and Alex would be in charge, but there was also a thrill in having more freedom. Deep down, I knew my mom would disapprove of us going out without supervision. Eventually, we ventured into the neighborhood, going from door to door. A few people asked if we were alone or where our parents were, and Mark always replied with the same lie, that his mom was ahead with his sister. This excuse worked every time. Since it was a Friday, we didn't start trick-or-treating until around 5 p.m., but we didn't have school the next day, so we intended to keep going until our bags were full. After a couple of hours, we took a break at Alex's house, where he heated up some frozen pizzas. At the time, I envied the apparent freedom he had at home, where no one seemed to care about what he did. Looking back now, I feel fortunate to have grown up in a household with 2 caring parents. After an hour of hanging out, eating pizza and candy while watching Halloween specials on TV, Mark's mom came to pick him up. Alex and I still wanted to keep going, so we headed back out for round 2. By now it was dark, probably past 8 p.m., and there were far fewer trick-or-treaters. We tried to explore blocks we hadn't yet visited, which took us further away from Alex's house. We found a block that seemed untouched and began knocking on doors. A lot of houses didn't answer, and most people commented on how late it was, or asked if we were alone. As we continued, we noticed a man pushing a stroller a few houses down behind us. He was moving slowly in our direction, likely a dad out for a stroll with his little girl. As we went from door to door, the man got closer. We heard him shushing and singing softly. Eventually, he approached us and asked, "How's the trick-or-treating going, boys?" We replied in unison that it was good. He then mentioned it was getting late and offered to give us the rest of his candy since he was heading back home. Alex and I exchanged excited glances. It felt like we had hit the jackpot. Alex asked what kind of candy he had, and the man mentioned a variety in bags hanging from the stroller's handle. He said he hadn't given much away because he wanted to take his daughter for a trick-or-treat stroll. The stroller was covered by a canopy, so we couldn't see his daughter. He explained that she was asleep and he didn't want to wake her, then pointed ahead, saying his house was just up the way. We followed him as he pushed the stroller, now moving a little faster. I realized there were hardly any other kids out. It was surprisingly quiet for a Friday night. The man chatted with us, asking about what part of the neighborhood we were from and where we went to school. I let Alex answer most of the questions since he was a year older and felt like he should take the lead. As we walked, the man leaned down to talk to his daughter in a high-pitched voice before turning back to smile at us. Finally, we arrived at his house. He guided us up the walkway, unlocked the door, and brought the stroller inside first, inviting us to follow. Alex led the way and I hesitated, asking if we could leave the door open. The man paused and said, "Yeah, of course," assuring us he'd be right back with the candy bags. As he pushed the stroller into the living room, I nudged Alex, feeling uncomfortable. I whispered, "Why would he leave the candy so far away?" Alex didn't respond, but walked toward the stroller, lifting the canopy that covered the baby. He looked visibly disturbed and quickly rushed back to me, whispering urgently, "Let's go!" He started running out, and I struggled to keep up with my heavy pillow sack. Just then, we heard a woman's voice calling out, "Excuse me!" A neighbor came running over, asking if we knew that man. It was at this point that Alex revealed everything, saying the man had offered us leftover candy, but was pushing a stroller with a fake baby in it. I felt a chill run down my spine as I processed what he said. The woman confirmed, "Yeah, that man doesn't have a child. I saw you walking with him." She took us to her car and drove us home. I know getting into a stranger's car wasn't the best idea, but I felt relieved to be away from that situation. When we arrived, the woman came to my front door to speak with my mom about what had happened. My mom was frantic as I shared every detail of the night. She sent me to my room while she and my dad called the police. They never shared what happened afterward, likely wanting to protect me from further distress. After that night, my mom didn't allow me to visit Alex anymore, and I knew she had quite a bit to say to his mom. I still saw Alex at school occasionally, and we remained cordial, but our friendship was never the same after that. It was Halloween night, 2016. My parents tasked me with handing out candies to the kids. My mom had bought a mountain of candy that I knew we'd be stuck with for weeks, and I'd be the one regrettably munching on them while trying to lose weight. I always told her she went overboard with the candy. Our house was located in a cul-de-sac on a dead end, so we rarely got many trick-or-treaters. However, we did have a few loyal kids who always came to us for the hefty candy haul. This year, Halloween fell on a Monday. I was in college and had Mondays and Wednesdays off, so I spent the first half of the day at the gym before tackling my assignments. Around 4 p.m., the sounds of children outside indicated the trick-or-treaters were out. The doorbell rang for the first time somewhere between 4 o'clock and 5 p.m. As the night went on, there was nothing remarkable about handing out candy to little kids, with my dog Vito barking like crazy every time the doorbell rang. By 8 p.m., we had maybe 10 to 15 kids total, as I expected, in our quiet cul-de-sac. Since it was a Monday night, things quieted down earlier than usual. I managed to finish a good amount of homework, had some of my mom's leftover stew, and retreated to my room to watch Game of Thrones. I was just 2 episodes in when I heard the unexpected sound of the doorbell. It was about 9:30 p.m., definitely past the cutoff time for trick-or-treaters. I headed downstairs to the front door, and through the glass storm door, I saw a very tall man in a clown costume with a terrifying mask. I knew it was a man just from the size of him. He waved and pointed to the brown sack he was holding, which looked almost empty. I didn't open the storm door. I simply said through it, "Sorry, we don't have any more candy," and slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. I instantly regretted opening the door. I'd thought it was just some kid or a parent who had gotten off work late and wanted to squeeze in some last-minute trick-or-treating. But whoever was on our stoop was not a kid. He was massive, and the clown costume only made him seem even bigger. Thank goodness I didn't grab the candy bag before opening the door, or he would have known I was lying. I lingered by the door for a moment, straining to hear if he walked away, but I didn't hear anything. Instead, he rang the doorbell again. Vito started barking wildly. As a rat terrier, his bark was more annoying than intimidating, and he certainly wouldn't defend the house from an intruder. I picked him up and carried him upstairs, turning off the lights downstairs as a half-hearted attempt to convince him I wasn't opening the door again that night. I locked Vito in my room and shut the door to keep him quiet. I stood at the top of the stairs, listening intently. Suddenly, I heard a loud snap through the front door, as if the latch had broken. Then came more knocks, followed by the sound of the door being rattled. At that point, I decided to hide in my room. I felt incredibly unsettled and texted my family group chat about what was happening. No one responded. In hindsight, I knew whoever was at the door would have to get bored eventually. I thought about texting my guy friends, but they were all short, and I knew they wouldn't be much help. I tried to shake off my anxiety and resumed watching my episode, but then the doorbell rang again, and I felt like I was living a nightmare. I kept telling Vito to shush, keeping my blinds closed so that the clown wouldn't know what room I was in. I tried calling my dad, but he didn't pick up. My brother answered, revealing he was with a girl, and told me it was probably just a Halloween prank to ignore it. He seemed eager to hang up, and I was left hoping he was right. It made the most sense, after all. After a few more minutes of anxious waiting, I felt a sense of relief when the doorbell finally stopped ringing. I lay back down, hoping to relax. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I was jolted awake by Vito growling softly and quietly barking. I told him to be quiet, and he stopped. But then I noticed he was staring at the window. I listened closely and heard a faint thumping sound, as if something was rubbing against the window. My bedroom was on the second floor, so it seemed impossible for anyone to be outside, but I couldn't shake my unease. I got up and pushed open the blinds, only to be horrified to see the clown standing right there, staring back at me. His horrific mask was pressed against the glass, and he tilted his head, grinning maniacally. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but Vito didn't bark. I bolted from my room, phone in hand, and rushed into my parents' bedroom, locking the door behind me. I dialed 911, shaking so much that I could barely speak. I repeatedly begged the operator to hurry up, and she reassured me they were on their way. The police arrived in roughly 10 minutes, inspecting the exterior of the house for any signs of attempted entry. They discovered that the latch on the front storm door had indeed been broken, just as I suspected, and leaned against the side of the house by my bedroom window was my dad's ladder. The man had gone into our storage shed and found the ladder to climb up to my window. To avoid any further complications, I decided to stay at my friend Adam's house that night. To this day, I still wonder whether this was just a sick prank played on Halloween, or if something far more sinister was about to happen.